Hello YouTubers and welcome to the JKLenses guide to some of the best Nikon lenses you can buy. In this video we run down a list of the very best Nikon lenses that I've come across in many years of using them, dating back to the days of film photography and manual lenses. As you can see from the list, I've tried to pick a favourite lens in each of the focal length ranges, so as to at least give you a bit of a starting point no matter what kind of lens you're after. The following selection obviously comes with a bit of a health warning, as I've not used every single Nikon lens ever made. However, to turn that on its head, every lens in my selection appears there because it's provided me with excellent images over many years of use. Starting at the ultra-wide focal length, my top choice would definitely be the Nikon 14-24 f2.8 AFS zoom lens. Now you might be thinking this is going to turn into a very short video where I simply recommend the highest priced and the highest spec lens in each category. However, as you'll see pretty soon, nothing could be further from the truth. The truth of the matter is, I don't often take photographs that need these ultra-wide focal lengths. But when I do, I reach for the 14-24 and it gets the job done to a very high standard indeed. End of story. At the wide angle focal lengths, the standout lens for me has always been the 35mm f2 AFD lens. Although it's very small and very cheap, its optical quality is better than any standard zoom, and the lack of AFS technology is largely irrelevant in such a titchy lens. Nikon now provide even faster apertured lenses at this focal length, but I've never really seen the point. As I mentioned in my review of this lens, if you're shooting at the standard lens focal length, then you're not likely to have too many complaints about the images from the 50mm f1.4 AFS lens. However, our mission at JKLenses is to find the very best optical quality at the most economical price, which is why I'm recommending the 50mm f1.4 AFD lens in this category. Incidentally, don't be confused by the photograph of my copy, which is an AFN version, the version before AFD. The important thing is it's pre-AFS technology where the lens is focused by a screwdriver blade from the camera body. My reason for recommending this lens is very simple. After many years of using both versions, there's next to no difference between them in optical quality. Although if I had to choose, then the AFD version would just squeeze ahead by virtue of its lower levels of distortion. Although the AFS version has more advanced autofocus technology, the difference in speed in the lens is small, really is practically unnoticeable. Unless you think it's worth paying a good deal of money for the ability to override the autofocus system without flicking a switch, then on the JKLenses maximum optical quality for least amount of money scale, the AFD version wins by a large margin. These two lenses illustrate an important point about Nikon lenses, which is worth taking a moment just to think about. One of the reasons why Nikon has such a top position amongst camera lenses is due to the fact that nearly half a century ago they worked out how to use a handful of glass elements to produce a high quality low distortion image across the 35mm or FX format frame. In their standard lenses, this excellent 7-element design has been available in their lenses since the 1970s. This explains why AI and AIS versions of the 50mm f1.4 hold their value on the second-hand market despite their age, and will also give you optical quality as good as, if not slightly better than, the modern AFS version. In the fast aperture moderate telephoto range, Nikon have a number of legendary designs which can be used to take simply stunning images. The 85mm focal length is just perfect for all kinds of portraiture and gives a perspective which can be used to make all kinds of things look good. The fast aperture below f2 allows you to isolate objects from their surroundings without needing to stand too far away from them. Combining these two features results in a series of lenses that can produce photographs with a level of impact that really is all their own. Nikon produce f1.4, f1.8, AFD and AFS versions of their 85mm autofocus lenses, and they can all produce Nikon's fast 85mm magic. There's a huge amount of argument around as to which of the four is the best, much of which seems to be basically dancing on the head of a pin. There are probably two conclusions that I would pull out of this particular scrap. Firstly, the f1.8 AFD lens is by far the best value for money, and secondly that the f1.4 AFS lens is somewhat overpriced. Speaking personally, I love the almost instantaneous autofocus of the f1.4 AFS lens, but miss the tank-like build quality of the AFD version. Talking of lenses with spectacular levels of sharpness, beautiful out-of-focus areas, and Rolls-Royce-like build quality, brings us neatly onto the 105mm f2 DC lens. At a slightly longer focal length, this lens works a similar magic to the fast 85mm lenses. It renders objects supremely sharply and throws their backgrounds into some of the most beautiful bokeh available. The f2 AFD version pictured here has some of the best build quality money can buy. In terms of the uses that I put this lens to, that's pretty much all I've got to say, and I'd happily buy this lens without the defocus control. Being able to change the levels of foreground and background blur independent of the shooting aperture is a handy feature, and an awful lot of photographers make tremendous creative use of it. I'm certainly not one of them, and I use the feature occasionally to tweak images a little bit. But for me, the amazing quality of the images is more than enough to justify the lens's price tag. And also, have I ever felt the need to buy a plastic f1.4 version costing a great deal more money? No. If I had plans to make a video about Nikon lenses that give outstanding optical performance at a ridiculously low price, then the 180mm f2.8 lens would feature heavily. I'm always amazed by the number of people who give this lens little or no consideration. Rather like the 105mm f2, it combines outstanding sharpness with absolutely beautiful out-of-focus areas, producing images so natural and lifelike you could almost reach out and touch them. My personal theory is that this lens's amazingly natural images are the result of its low element count, as they're clearly nothing to do with almost any of Nikon's amazing technological advances over the past 20 years, since this lens doesn't have any of them. This long-standing, simple yet high-quality design is extremely good news for people wanting to buy this lens. There are simply decades worth of second-hand copies of this lens available, at prices which are simply bonkers, considering the quality of the images it can produce. Even the elderly manual versions of this lens, as long as they're the post-ED design, can produce images that modern space-age zoom lenses can only dream of. And on a similar theme, if you're thinking that the combined price tag of some of these telephoto lenses is getting awfully high, then there's some good news. Nikon have been producing fast aperture telephoto lenses, which produce superb sharpness and wonderful out-of-focus areas, since forever. At the 135mm focal length, there are simply loads of Nikon's f2.8 AIS manual focus lens available. These lenses deliver superb optical quality at ridiculously low prices, and similar examples can be found at most of the focal lengths within this range. This video really does seem to be developing into a series of me jumping up and down about lenses with outstanding optical quality that don't get enough coverage. If you need to shoot way beyond the 200mm focal length, then here are two more lenses that represent simply unmissable value for money. The original AFS version of the Nikon 300mm f4 is quite simply Nikon's sharpest lens at this focal length. With the obvious exception of the incredibly expensive 300mm f2.8 lenses, nothing else comes anywhere close. Images are bitingly sharp with smooth and natural out-of-focus areas. If you combine this with the lens's very ordinary price, particularly second-hand, then its value for money rating is simply off the scale. I shoot quite a lot at this focal length, and the two lenses I use are this one and the 200-400 f4 Monster Professional Super Zoom. Which of these two lenses I take with me generally depends on the practicalities of travelling, and this means that over the years I've shot an awful lot of very similar images with the two lenses. What always amazes me is the similarity in the quality of the images from the 300 f4 compared to the 200-400 f4 set at 300mm. Despite the massive difference in price, the two sets of images are remarkably similar. This obviously gives you some idea of the quality of the images from the 300 f4, in that it can match images from lenses costing many times more, and it's also a bit of a backhanded compliment to the 200-400, in that it can maintain prime lens quality even though it's a zoom lens. The caveat here is I'm nearly always able to use my 300 f4 on a tripod, and can usually pre-focus on the spot where my subject's going to be. This means that the lack of VR and grumbles about autofocus speed, size, weight and hand-holding really don't bother me. Clearly enough people have grumbled about the size and handling characteristics of the 300 f4, leading Nikon to produce the much smaller VR version with its scrumptious Fresnel element. If you need to move around a lot, hand-holding your lens and following the motion of irregularly moving subjects, then the 300mm f4 VR Fresnel lens may be a better choice overall. If you're becoming captivated by all the razzmatazz surrounding the new Fresnel version of this lens, then I think there's two key points which need to be borne in mind. Firstly, although the amazingly titchy size may be a complete deal breaker for many people, it is way more expensive than the original AFS version. In terms of amount of optical quality compared to amount of money, the original AFS 300 f4 knocks the new lens completely out the park. Secondly, although including a Fresnel element is a seriously cunning way of reducing the size and weight of the lens, it's not a technique designed to enhance image quality. As you can see here, chopping up a convex lens and keeping only the curved edge parts is not something you do to improve image quality, but it does result in a very large saving in terms of weight. There are lots of examples of uses of Fresnel lenses in everyday life, but I'm a bit surprised that the example of the Fresnel lens in a lighthouse is so often used. As you can probably imagine, this is an example of a Fresnel lens which can't produce a smooth and continuous image, such as you need for photography. The guys and gals at Nikon have clearly done a fantastic job in disguising the fact that the Fresnel element doesn't have a smooth continuous surface, and the effects of this are only very slightly noticeable in the images produced by this lens. If you were starting to get the idea that the new Whizzy lens with its exotic sounding elements was able to produce much better images than the rather tired looking original AFS version, then this is definitely not the case. At 300mm f4, the best optical quality available is with the original AFS lens, and for me it's always been a lens that simply never disappoints. Although rather an ungainly looking lens, the 400mm f3.5 manual focus lens probably delivers some of the sharpest images of all the lenses in this whole video. On almost any measure of image quality it would score an outstanding, with effectively zero distortion across the entire FX frame. As you can see, this is quite a large lens, although not excessively so when you consider it's almost a 400mm f2.8, although it is extremely heavy, particularly at the front. Levels of build quality simply can't be matched by any lens in production today, making it probably the finest lens I've ever owned. Modern 400mm f2.8 lenses don't really show any progress in terms of image quality over this lens, although they obviously offer autofocus and vibration reduction, etc. Although it's nice to have features like this, they do seem to be coming at a simply astronomical price when you look at the price difference between these two lenses. Given that I always use this lens on a tripod and can pre-focus on where my subject's going to be, then my personal value for money rating for this lens is just ridiculously high. Given its astonishing optical quality, I'm always amazed how little one hears about this lens. For me, it's a lens that simply redefined my horizons of what's possible in terms of image quality on the FX format. Choosing the best macro lens for this review simply couldn't be easier. I've used the 60mm f2.8 AFD micro Nikkor to take the images of lenses that you can see in every review on this channel. As you can see, it produces sharp, accurate and true-to-life images with effectively no distortion. I have absolutely no understanding of why there's an AFS version of this lens, except that it helps to push down the price of this lens on the second-hand market a little bit, which is good news because I think everybody should own this lens. It maintains outstanding image quality and zero distortion with ordinary size subjects, producing images as good or better than any of Nikon's 50mm standard lenses. As I've said before, anything with micro Nikkor on the side is pretty much a guarantee of some of the best image quality around, and so I can also recommend the 105 and the 200mm micro Nikkors. These are obviously designed for photographing titchy things where you need to keep your distance from them. As I'm not a regular wide-angle shooter, I'm going to chicken out a bit when it comes to recommending a wide or an ultra-wide zoom lens, by simply recommending the superb 14-24 AFS wide-angle zoom. Although I'm sure there are other good lenses in these fields, you can rely on the 14-24 to get you top-quality images at these focal lengths. In the ever-popular standard zoom range, there's a number of lenses that can be relied upon to give excellent results, and hopefully one to suit every pocket. At the top of the food chain we have the 24-70 professional zoom lenses, the latest one including VR. With their fast f2.8 aperture and their comfortably wide 24mm wide end, these lenses can be relied upon to deliver excellent results in a wide range of situations. This explains their popularity despite their very substantial price tag. It's probably just me, but I do remain a big fan of their predecessor, the 28-70 f2.8 zoom. Although the lack of a 24mm setting can be a right nuisance at times, I do love its full metal jacket construction and the fact that the images it produces look so similar to a prime lens. You might hope that the fact it's been superseded by the 24-70 zoom lenses might bring its price on the second-hand market down a bit, but unfortunately quality always sells, and you are getting a great deal of lens for your money here. At a more middling price point, I can recommend the 24-120 f4 VR lens. Although it looks the part, it saves money with a heavily plastic-based construction. It's a cleverly designed lens with its distortion and fall-off carefully hidden away where most people aren't going to notice them in their final images. I've only occasionally been disappointed by the images from this lens, and it's most certainly a standard zoom that's very easy to live with. Getting back onto my theme of really excellent lenses that no one seems to take any notice of anymore, I'd like to include a standard zoom that gives top quality results for a ridiculously small amount of money. The 28-105 f3.5 to 4.5 AFD lens really doesn't look anything special from the outside. However, the optics inside are very sharp and produce images with very little distortion and hardly any fall-off. Three phrases that you almost never hear when talking about low-price zoom lenses. There have been a number of occasions when I can't be doing with taking the 24-70 f2.8 and have used this lens instead, and I would struggle to point to a single image where I could say this lens has let me down. In my mind, it gives you 80% or so of the image quality at less than a tenth of the price. I'm sure many people are put off from this lens by its AFD technology, where the lens is focused by a screwdriver blade from the camera body. However, the lack of a silent wave motor in the lens doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be slow in autofocus. It means it's going to be much more dependent upon the camera body that you mount it on. Certainly some of the early AFN and AFD lenses, when mounted on a low-priced film SLR body, could be extremely slow in autofocus. But this was partly due to the quality of the motor inside the camera body. On a suitable modern DSLR body, the 28-105's autofocus is extremely brisk. In real-life situations, it is barely a heartbeat behind the almost instantaneous focus of the 24-70 f2.8 lenses. Recommending a Nikon Telephoto Zoom really couldn't be easier. In something like 15 years of heavy use, it's consistently produced images of close to prime lens quality. If you go to its review elsewhere on this channel, you can listen to over 40 minutes of me raving on about this lens. Super-Telephoto zoom lenses don't come cheap, but if you want near prime lens quality in the 200-400mm focal length range, then the 200-400 f4 lens will get the job done for you every time. Unfortunately, it's about the same price as a small battleship, and weighs about the same as well. I certainly can't complain about the near prime lens quality of its images, but I have to admit I am very interested to get my hands on a copy of the 200-500 f5.6 lens, almost entirely because of its smaller size and weight. I'm sure at some point in this video you've been chucking stuff at the screen and shouting, but what about ... lens? As I said at the start, I'm sure I've missed out some spectacular lenses, so please add them to the comment box below if your favourite lens hasn't appeared in this video. Looking on the positive side though, I can personally vouch for every single lens mentioned in this video, and I'd be very surprised if you were disappointed by the results from any of them. If you've enjoyed this video then please subscribe, and as always, many thanks for watching.